I would much just prefer to watch the Chiefs win. And they just happened to play each other this week, so I couldn't have. I mean, I could have my cake and eat it too, and it just didn't occur.
Instead, you got your Le'Veon and got your bell rung.
Yeah, and they were ringing his bell all day. Ringing my bell. Yeah.
Oh God, that didn't even make. I don't even know if some of those noises registered. I think only dogs could hear the top end of that.
Yeah, that hurt my throat. This is why I don't do a falsetto.
Hey everybody, it's Tuesday, October the 18th, 2017, and this is the Fourth and Wrong podcast. I'm RJ, and with me, as always, is Keith. Say hi, Keith.
Hi, Keith.
Okay, well, I tried to bring some enthusiasm to this. Clearly, Keith isn't having it, so that's been the Fourth and Wrong podcast. Say goodbye, Keith.
Goodbye, Keith.
Hey, everybody, just kidding. It's October the 18th, 2017, and this is the Fourth and Wrong podcast. Let's try that again. Say fucking hi, Keith.
Fucking hi, Keith.
There we go. Bringing it back. Let's
I'm in
take
it.
this. All right, now we're in it.
I'm in it. Yep. You caught me off guard.
So let's talk about some football. The Bills didn't play this week, so fuck you. You get to start, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Well, all right, so I guess we're talking about Cleveland.
That's usually how we start. This is one of us talks about our team.
Yeah, so I was actually kind of surprised this week. There was good ball movement. LeBron looked good.
Uh-huh.
I'm still uncomfortable with the fact that he has to play 40 minutes a game to win.
I mean, it's really Derrick Rose driving for you guys all the time. I don't know if that's going to pan out. He seems a little small to be taking it to the end zone like that so frequently.
Yeah, but, Dwayne Wade and LeBron seem to be having similar chemistry they had with the Heat, so we're going to see what happens with their second game. I'm
really surprised with how many starters they put on the bench to, like make room for these new guys and reposition things. It's got me confused about, what the front office is doing.
Well, it happens.
Yeah.
When you're trying to create an all-star team, somebody's got to take the L.
Wait. Hold on. I just realized something.
What?
You said all-star team, and we're trying to talk about Cleveland. I think
you meant the Browns.
Yeah,
okay.
Shit. I think we started talking about the wrong team.
Shit. Well, I would much rather talk about the Cavs. Can we keep doing that?
Too bad.
All right. Well, we'll get it over with, I guess. Turnovers kill Cleveland. Hogan was trying to do his best Kaiser impression. Absolutely no running game. Good showing from the rushing defense, which I expected because when you have a super spongy secondary, people are just going to want to throw it on you anyways.
Honestly, I think he did a very good Kaiser impression.
Yeah, no, it was great. He's had a higher completion percentage.
He's got to work on that. Those are rookie numbers. He's got to get those numbers way down.
Yeah. But, 1 touchdown to 3 interceptions and an 8.6 QBR.
Not great.
Not great. The pressure up front was a little lackluster, especially because for some reason they still have Myles Garrett on a pitch count.
Uh-huh.
But he did have 5 total tackles, 2 solo, a sack, and 4 QB hits. So he's definitely bringing the heat up front. Just nobody else is helping him. Jason McCourty had a nice pick six.
Yes, I did see that.
That made me pretty excited. Once again, it was one of those things where aired throw or not, he just saw the route well and made a football play and ran it back.
I mean, and then made a bunch of people miss on the way back.
Yeah,
it wasn't.
Yeah.
It's not one of these like, oh, I cut the route at the line of scrimmage. He was upfield and then dodged like 6 dudes to get there.
Yeah, no, he was breaking ankles on the way to the end zone, which was nice to see. it gave a little bit of a spark.
Wait, hold on. Breaking ankles. Are we back to the Cavaliers game?
No. Christ. Too soon.
Well, I mean, when isn't it too soon? Like the first 2 months?
Technically, it was dislocated, not broken.
Well, I don't care. That motherfucker's foot was on sideways.
Well, yeah. You can't hide that one. It was gruesome, too. That was gross. Anyways, Deshaun Watson, this was kind of that game that everybody wanted to watch to see how bad Cleveland fucked up by not taking Deshaun Watson.
Uh-huh.
If we were to base it purely off of his numbers and how well he was able to perform, we can make a pretty strong conclusion that we fucked up big time by not picking up Deshaun Watson. Relatively accurate, can move outside of the pocket, make plays, 3 touchdowns to 1 interception, 200-plus yards.
Deshaun Watson did seem like going into the draft the big like boom or bust quarterback on the board.
Oh, totally. His physical attributes were great, and people knew he could play in big moment games because he pretty much did it all the time at Clemson. That's how Clemson beat Alabama in the national championship, was a late quarter comeback.
And you know who Deshaun Watson lost to?
The Bills.
Nathan Peterman. It was their one loss of the whole season, and Pitt took it from him. So I'm just saying, 5th-round quarterbacks, they're not all bad. We'll see how that develops in the next 3 years in Buffalo.
Totally.
No, we won't.
So if you take it at face value, yeah, it seems like the Browns did fuck up with Deshaun Watson, but we also did it last year with Carson Wentz, and this year kind of with Jared Goff, now that Jared Goff is putting up decent numbers. So it's a trend, but I just don't think Cleveland wants to bite on a quarterback in the draft unless they know for 100% he's going to be the guy.
I still don't know if Jared Goff is that great. I think you take Jared Goff out and you put Carson Wentz in Los Angeles right now, and they're 6-0, like with the way that's been playing out.
Sure.
Like Jared Goff only got good this year when they put a bunch more weapons around him, and Todd Gurley took a lot of pressure off of him. So.
Yeah, well, Todd Gurley's putting a lot of pressure took a lot of pressure off of him, and they're running a new offense. Getting rid of Jeff Fisher probably had a lot to do with this too.
Yeah.
Considering he was garbage, like Jeff Fisher is garbage. He's garbage. The losingest head coach in the NFL, followed shortly by Hugh Jackson, it seems. So, not a lot to report. More of the same. Nothing crazy. The only person to score a touchdown as far as offense goes was Dan Vitale, who is bouncing between first and second string tight end with David Njoku. They're kind of lining them up. They're kind of alternating between the two or playing them both because why the fuck not? Cleveland had to play so much defense this game, I can't analyze the offense because the offense just looked exactly like it has for the past 5 weeks.
Anemic, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, very, very anemic. There's nothing going on. The only time Cleveland's looked like a football team this year was week 1. I think we're to the point in the year where we need to start having conversations about play calling and coaching.
Mm-hmm.
I think this conversation should have been had a couple of weeks ago, but now it's getting to the point where it's almost ridiculous.
You're talking about just the Browns in this case.
Right.
Okay.
Because Hugh Jackson calls all of Cleveland's plays. And we've seen success from other teams, including teams this year, when they take away the offensive play calling from the head coach and give it to an OC and just let the head coach do the head coaching thing. Hell, the Giants won a game this week because of it. I'm still confused. I know Hugh Jackson's supposed to be an offensive guy, but what ends up going on is there's a divide with your head coach and your coordinators because your players start to see Hugh Jackson as the offense guy and the head coach. But when he has to focus more attention to the production of the offense and all that fun stuff. So you can't necessarily rely on him to do head coachy things. But in the turn, Hugh Jackson is pretty much giving Greg Williams free reign to do whatever he wants with the defense. So it kind of alleviates that pressure. But I think somebody to objectively call plays for the offense, like an offensive coordinator, would do wonders. The other thing that the conversation needs to be had is what exactly is going on when Hugh Jackson is quote-unquote developing these quarterbacks, because the game Kevin Hogan threw, those interceptions were just bad balls. And it's not the Kevin Hogan that we saw in his limited play time throughout or during this season and during preseason. Now, maybe the pressure of playing a full game under center got to him, or maybe it was a lot of pressure in his face that he wasn't used to seeing, because like I told you last week, Houston Texans' front seven is still dangerous without J.J. Watt.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin Hogan was sacked 4 times. He was pressured like 10. You know, he always had red and blue in his face. He's a physical guy, so he can break out of the pocket and extend the play. But once again, we're falling into that area where we don't have those playmakers in the receiving game to create separation and really break it open for him. You know, when your QB starts to scramble, that's when the receivers, pick up on that and usually break the route to be open, try to get open to save their quarterback essentially. And when you're already not getting separation, it's very difficult to do that. There was plenty of wayward passing on the offense that obviously turned into turnovers. It put way too much pressure on the defense. Whenever Cleveland has started so slow and the defense is pretty much having to compensate for the lack of offense, we see a showing that we did this week. And now we're to the point where it's happened 5 weeks in a row.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like we're getting to the point where we're throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks.
And everything's sliding off the wall.
And everything's sliding off the wall. I'm not seeing any major adjustments or anything. The only big thing I've seen is the fact that Peyton Manning visited Cleveland this past week.
Yeah,
because they're looking for executives for the front office.
You guys need a higher fiber diet.
Make that shit more tacky.
Yeah.
So as far as that goes, when it puts so much pressure on the defense, especially Houston, who has weapons and they have a mobile quarterback, you're not going to be able to contain him that long. Especially when you're not putting enough pressure on Deshaun Watson, and he has those kind of weapons, he's going to dot you up. And although it wasn't a immaculate showing as far as the passing game goes, they were the ones moving the ball, not Cleveland. And as far as that, I'm just frustrated at this point, because it just doesn't appear to me that the coaching staff is doing anything different. But we've lost games 5 weeks in a row because of the same shit. And if it keeps going, it's going to be to the point that every single time we have this show, I'm going to have nothing to talk about. I'm just going to sit here and be like, Cleveland did what they did last week, and then we're going to talk about the Bills.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. There was always a place in the back of my mind that was like, so when we get to the middle of the season, what the hell are we going to talk about as far as our teams go? And hey, maybe it's a great turning point. Maybe we get more fans. Maybe they're like, oh, thank God they're not just talking about their crap-ass teams anymore. But, it takes some of the fun out of it for us.
Yeah. We'll see what happens next week. That's pretty much the only thing I can say.
Mm-hmm.
The big news I can say about Cleveland is they did rename Deshaun Kaiser as the starter for next week.
Oh yeah,
and
I was going to ask what was going on with that situation. It's like, no, actually we just picked this dude up off the street. He's been sleeping outside of the stadium, so he's got a real short commute. And he's going to be our starting quarterback for the next week. We're going to get him suited up.
I would almost be willing to say that would be a actual option to consider.
He's going to be wearing Johnny Manziel's number 2. It's the left half of LeBron's ripped jersey from last night. So here you go. Oh shit, I'm dating this podcast. Whoops.
Whoopsie.
Well, technically I date it every week. I just always say it's Tuesday, so whatever.
Yeah.
Magic. All right. Are we good on the Browns? I mean, you.
Yeah. Until I have something to actually talk about, it's just going to be more of the same.
We look forward to it.
Yeah. You're not the only one.
So, well, I meant hearing the same thing. I mean, it'd be great if we had something other than that, but.
Yeah. No, I want something positive, damn it.
The whole team got STD tested, and we've got some positive news.
Christ.
Different kind of positive.
Just different a little bit. It would be amazing if Josh Gordon can get reinstated, because I'm pretty sure at this point they would totally play him.
I really think we should put that on some sort of tracker. It's like, all right, number of weeks in a row that Keith has said, let's bring back Josh Gordon. Oh, wait. It's still not happening.
Still not happening. One of these days, damn it. He's still got gas in the tank.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, certainly. I mean, he's definitely burning something in the backfields.
Hemp oil can be used as an alternate fuel.
Right. Yes. There we go. There's my out. Okay. Well, let's start with Thursday,
Okay.
which is probably when this thing will come out again, but we'll see what happens there.
Sure.
Eagles Panthers. The 5-1 Eagles against the now 5-1 Eagles, the then 4-1 Eagles against the Panthers. Spoilers if anybody is listening to this and hasn't looked at a scoreboard in a week.
What are you doing?
Sorry, Jesus dies at the end. So, you asked me last week if I thought the Eagles were a legitimate contender.
Yeah.
I'm still sort of backing off of that as like, nah, I don't think they're as good as their record is. And the game this weekend, or the game on Thursday, showed that getting interceptions that start a drive in your red zone is really good.
Yep.
And turning the ball over inside of your 20 is really bad. I know that's literally saying the same thing twice, but I just want to emphasize, I don't think they did that much.
Yeah, it reflects in the offensive numbers. They scored 28 points, but they only put up 300 yards of total offense.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of scoring to occur. And
especially when at the end of the game you're just trying to like run the clock out.
Right, So Cam Newton had 3 interceptions. Some of them were bad balls, some of them were hawked by the secondary, but in general, if it wasn't for Philly's defense, there wouldn't have been much football.
Yeah.
Because whenever Philadelphia had the entire field out in front of them on offense, they were not pushing the ball downfield well at all. And I think the fact that Carolina was unable – a lot of pressure was put on Cam Newton in this game because literally not a single one of their running backs got over 10 yards rushing.
Right.
They had 80 yards total rushing. 71 of them were Cam Newton.
Right.
So that, in turn, made Cam Newton throw for 52 attempts. When you're throwing the ball downfield that much, you're bound to throw picks. It's just going to happen. So it was definitely not a balanced offense, and that was pretty much exactly what Philly wanted because Philly has one of the best front sevens in the NFC. Fletcher Cox could have easily been the MVP of that game with how much pressure he was putting on Cam in that rushing game.
Their defense across the board is incredibly stout. Like, it's one of those situations where you're looking at this team and you're like, they got 3 interceptions and only allowed, less than 240 passing yards, and their secondary is the weakest part of their team. Like,
yep.
Like, no, they're great on defense. Like, you can't take that away from them. I just don't know that the offense is, really clicking as much as you'd think because Carson Wentz has 3 touchdowns. But like you said, he's got like 200 yards passing.
Yeah, and all 3 of those touchdowns are when they started in their own red zone.
Right.
And like we said last week, when you look back at the schedule, who have they played? The one game they should have lost, they lost, against Kansas City. And besides that, they played Washington, who's underperforming right now, New York, who at the time was severely underperforming, L.A., Arizona, and then Carolina. This was supposed to be the test game, but when they were put to the test, the offense didn't show me anything.
Right. Yeah, it seemed like a whole lot of luck showed up.
Mm-hmm. And the same could be said.
Which is weird because he's still out through week 6, so I don't know like what he's doing.
He's actually probably going to be out longer.
Yeah.
Because there's been a step back in his shoulder injury.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll probably talk about that in a moment. But even back when they played New York, Wentz only threw for 170-something yards, and their leading rusher had 71 yards rushing. So obviously, they're just on those 2 numbers alone, I can assume that there's a lot to do with the defense. Mm-hmm. They've really only had 1 or 2 breakaway games, maybe 3 breakaway games on offense where it's like, okay, these guys are legit, but they're not doing it consistently enough to show anything to me. And fortunately for them, they don't really have anybody on their schedule,
right?
That is a balanced team that can really put them through their paces. They've already beaten Washington, and we'll see what goes on with that. San Francisco is an underperforming team. Denver still has a good defense, but their defense is, for the past 2 weeks, have slightly underperformed, and their offense isn't really getting anything going under Trevor Siemian. Dallas is a coin flip.
Yeah, I mean Dallas is again. Dallas is a coin flip twice. The Rams are a thing, and now with Derek Carr bouncing back as quick as he did, the Raiders might be a thing.
Yeah,
But
we'll see.
But other than that, you're still
Yeah.
talking about the Bears, you're still talking about the
Yeah.
Niners, you're still talking about the
Yeah.
Giants again and the Redskins again. So
I see a couple of losses. I see a couple of losses in their schedule, but it wouldn't be outside of the realm of possibility for the Eagles, just based off their schedule alone, not even how they're playing. Just based off their schedule alone, it would not be unreasonable to say that the Eagles wouldn't be able to come out of the season like 12-4.
I was gonna say, it is not a far stretch for me to say that they are a 10 to 12 win game or
Yeah,
10 to 12 win team by the end of
they
the
could
season.
they could easily run away with the NFC if people give them enough leeway and space.
Mm-hmm.
And then the real test will be when they start playing other AFC opponents in the playoffs, people that they're not going to see during, or the different caliber of play that teams usually bring to the playoffs.
You mean NFC teams?
Yes, NFC teams. If they make it out of the NFC and go to the Super Bowl, well, then we'll see what happens there.
Yeah. Then they'll get to play an AFC team in the playoffs.
Yep. Yeah, I totally meant NFC.
Okay. We're just gonna leave that all in there. That's fine.
But
we fuck up sometimes.
but the other thing that really pushes that point home is the fact that the Eagles were sloppy with penalties.
Yes.
And were completely unable to push the ball downfield. So their defense totally kept them in that, and it was the Panthers' inability to capitalize on a weak offense and keep turning the ball over.
Mm-hmm.
The Panthers couldn't capitalize on the penalties or the fledgling offense. Instead, they just kept turning the ball over and shouldering way too much pressure on Cam, who still had a decent game outside of the turnovers, but he did not look like he did a week ago.
Right. That was the one major stat I had forgotten about until this moment when you brought it up was penalties. Carolina, 1 penalty for a yard. Philadelphia, 10 penalties for 126 yards. That's more than a football field. That's more than a football field with both of the end zones included.
Yeah. If a team has more than 100 yards, should that count as points?
No.
Okay.
Unfortunately. Well, or fortunately for the Bills during the Rex Ryan era. I'm sorry, the Rex Ryan error. I mispronounced that the first time. No offense, Rex. I liked you as a head coach. I think you were gone too soon.
I like him more in Between Two Rexes.
Oh, is that a thing?
Yeah, it's like a commercial thing that the network he works for. It's literally him sitting in a chair, and then there's a Rex Ryan cutout that sits on the other side of the chair.
Is it just a ghetto version of Zach Galifianakis's Between Two Ferns?
Wait, hold on. Did you just say is it a ghetto version of Between Two Ferns?
Listen, Zach,
implying that Between Two Ferns isn't ghetto?
That's a high quality production.
My ass, it's a high quality production. It's a black curtain with 2 fake ferns.
They've got chairs and a table too.
Oh man!
And Zach Galifianakis.
Well, so does Between Two Rexes, and they got Rex Ryan.
So what you're saying is yes, it's the same thing.
It's the same thing, yes.
Oh God.
Yes.
All right. Well, I'll have to see that stupid thing.
Yeah, it's Rex Ryan sitting in a chair interviewing a guy, and then on the other side of the guy is a cutout of Rex Ryan.
Can't wait to see Zach Galifianakis's Between Two Ferns with Rex Ryan, where he just stares at him in dead silence for 5.5 straight minutes uncut, and then it ends, because that's how that would go.
Yeah, I would watch it.
Okay, do we have anything else more to say about Eagles-Panthers?
Panthers really should have won that game.
Yeah. Well, they were definitely set up to.
Yeah.
They should have. They again, I will argue, are the better team at this point. So, one game that I forgot and didn't actually look at the highlights for, the Dolphins beat the Falcons.
Yeah. Jay Cutler had a good game. Jay Ajayi is still really good.
Yeah, I don't know what to do about that. Yeah, I mean, Jay Ajayi had 130 yards, so that's par for the course.
Yep.
For him. Julio Jones looks like he's back. What has it been, 2 weeks since we beat the Falcons? So
yeah,
maybe he's still nursing something. Which basically, I think the only point I have to lead into is next week the Pats are going to beat the Falcons, and it's not just because they beat them in the Super Bowl. It's because apparently the Falcons can't fucking beat an AFC East team this year.
Yeah, it seems to be a trend. So do the Falcons play the Jets?
See, now you're asking questions.
Right. We should. Well, I want to
They
know
do
if the
actually.
Wow. So
The
AFC.
4 weeks in a row are the Bills, the Dolphins, the Patriots, the Jets. That's
the
their.
AFC East has the chance to run the table on the defending NFC champions. That's funny.
Yeah, it could be Atlanta Falcons start the season, look really great, are going to make a playoff run, and then they ran into the AFC East, and it's like, oh no, they're 3-4. I mean, again, I don't have anything else to say about it. So if you've got stuff,
yeah, I mean, it was a tale of two halves. Atlanta was up 17-0 in halftime, and then couldn't put up points afterwards.
Yeah, that is what it looks like.
Yeah, kind of super reminiscent of the Super Bowl L they took. And Jay Cutler came out of halftime slinging it. You know, his numbers aren't impressive, but he was definitely a much better quarterback in the second half. I remember watching part of that game.
Would you say at this point that Matty Ice may have lost his cool? That he's having a bit of a meltdown? Keith?
Are you done? Are you done?
Oh, you're still there. Okay, good.
Yeah, okay. Are you done?
Oh, yeah, I think so. let me make sure.
Yeah, so
he doesn't know what he's doing anymore.
Jesus Christ. Jesus, RJ, shut up.
I had to reach for that one.
You're reaching, and it's I'm losing my concentration. I can't work in this environment.
Filing this with HR, you're creating a hostile work environment.
Anyways, so Atlanta was unable to create pressure for Jay Cutler. Jay Cutler just had some booty passes all the way up until about halftime. Matt Ryan looked okay. They just couldn't be. They weren't able to be productive in the second half. Julio Jones is definitely back. Yes, I called him Julio Jones. I do that on purpose. And he was once again a reliable target for Matt Ryan. But that was one of those games where it was. I don't know what happened at halftime. Like, I don't know if Atlanta's coach was just like, "Hey, we can probably coast and still get this," and then Dolphins said, "Nah." But it was definitely a thriller towards the end, only because Miami was actually winning.
Right.
Yeah. If it was any other team, you know, Atlanta would have deserved the loss.
I mean, at this point, it seems like a lot of teams. Again, we're coming to the other side of like week 5, week 6, where it's like teams are sort of evening out, and people who had a poor start are picking up, and people who had a great unexpected start are kind of evening out a little bit.
Yeah, this does put Atlanta 1-2 at home, so we'll keep an eye on that.
Right? Weren't they undefeated last year?
Either undefeated or they only lost one.
Yeah, so
yeah, but they were tough to beat in Atlanta. But the Georgia Dome gets so fucking loud.
Yep.
It's one of the loudest places to play because it's a dome and it's a very tight dome. Atlanta fans were rowdy last year.
Hey Keith, talk to me about the Saints-Lions game that looks like the Saints playing like the Saints again.
Man, guess who actually really wasn't playing like the Saints? The only reason I say that is because, yes, if you look at the score,
which is what I'm looking at, and definitely not the game.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw a number at you.
Okay.
Drew Brees threw for 186 yards.
That's no, I'm sorry. You're thinking about Deshaun Kaiser.
No, Drew Brees threw for 186 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, but they scored 52 points.
No, you're thinking about year 3 Eli Manning.
Nope. Drew Brees' gunslinger and point scorer extraordinaire threw for 186 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions.
No, you're thinking about any Bills quarterback who wasn't Tyrod Taylor over the last decade.
Well, you're playing the joke out. Can we move on?
Rule of 3, buddy. This is... I don't make the rules, I just enforce them.
Yeah. Okay. Mark Ingram had a good game. 114 yards rushing for 2 touchdowns. Drew Brees didn't really have to throw the ball that much, though.
Doesn't look like it.
Because the defense scored 3 touchdowns.
Oh.
Yeah. So it wasn't the Saints that you used to know. It was the Broncos that were wearing Saints uniforms.
Oh, when the Saints go crushing skulls, they take the ball away and score. Da-da-da-da.
Matt Stafford also contributed with 3 interceptions. And they also had a pair of fumbles. I think total Matt Stafford had 5 turnovers that he was accountable for. and I'm pretty sure one of those turnovers was in the end zone. Drew Brees didn't really have to do much. Their running game was going well. Defense was scoring all the points, so it didn't really matter what Drew Brees did. They were winning that game pretty handedly.
So what you're saying is the Saints' offense looks like the Eagles' offense.
It minus the 2 picks, yeah, it was pretty similar circumstance, except the Saints were doing it better. Yeah. They were actually scoring on these turnovers.
Yeah, right.
The Saints had a few turnovers on their own. It was a sloppy game. If you look at the score, it looks like a typical what you would expect from the Lions and the Saints. Matt Stafford and Drew Brees just shooting it out with each other. But it was a lot more turnover / defensive heavy. Like even with the numbers looking the way they are as far as production on the Lions side, Matt Stafford still threw for under 50%, had 3 interceptions. It was not a good game on his part at all.
All right, so let's move on to a different NFC North matchup between the Packers and the Vikings, and the crushing defeat that the Packers suffered in more than one sense.
Boo. Boo. Boo you.
I'm glad we don't have to wait for like commentary or feedback, and that I just get like direct reactions to know what's coming down the road.
Yeah, that was. It should not have played out the way it did.
No, not likely.
Aaron Rodgers pretty much got knocked out very early in the game. And turned into a broken collarbone, and he's probably going to miss the rest of the season.
I think it was a broken collarbone the whole time. I don't think it's like a Pokemon and it evolved into a broken collarbone.
Well, we don't know until they take him to the back. All we knew at the time was a shoulder injury.
That's fair.
It's a developing news story until we know something.
Yeah.
Although it did crack me up when somebody showed me. Oh, Lord. There was a picture floating around the internet of like an x-ray of a collarbone, but they had photoshopped crying Jordan into the collarbone.
Oh, Jesus.
So that was pretty funny. But besides that, no, terrible. It was horrible.
What I will say is I think Aaron Rodgers with a broken collarbone still throws less than 3 interceptions.
Definitely. Absolutely. I don't even know who this Brent Hundley guy was.
He's apparently their backup quarterback. I mean...
Sure. And their head coach was just like, he's our guy and blah, blah, blah. It was actually really funny. There's a big how-to-do because it was brought up in a press conference to the head coach, like, why, or have you considered, Colin Kaepernick? Hey, athletic guy, can throw out of the pocket, kind of can do similar things to Aaron Rodgers. And his response was, no, we have to go with the quarterbacks in our system because our offense is so difficult, it takes approximately 3 years to learn it. And my thought process was, if your offense takes that long to learn, nobody could really succeed in that offense. Right. I know you as a good head coach, because he is a good head coach, have the capacity to simplify your offense to play towards the strengths of quarterbacks. We had this conversation last week. It is a thing you can do that you can be successful with when you have a quarterback with good set of skill and athleticism.
Right, and we were talking about rookies coming into the NFL, not people who have been proven quarterbacks.
Yeah, not only just a proven quarterback, a proven quarterback that played in the fucking Super Bowl.
Yeah, like I felt like there are certain things that like going to the BCS championship just doesn't quite equate to.
Right, so I felt like his comment was a little dumb, but I'm kind of tired of reporters bringing it up to everybody with a quarterback controversy. Like, well, have you considered Colin Kaepernick? And the short answer should be no. The long answer should be that's up to our head office.
Right.
So the fact that he even dignified the question with a response, and especially in a response like that, I was just like, you're...
Or you take the third option, which is just, we consider everything, and just leave it at that. It's like, all right, well...
Sure. Just give them the vaguest of vague answer and let them sort it out.
Or you hit him with the full Belichick, and you just, like look at the next reporter in the room.
Right. Or just, beast mode, I'm just here so I don't get fined. But Aaron Rodgers going down that early in the game really showed how important he is to that team, and that's pretty much their playoffs. If he can't come back for this season, that's it. That's done. I mean, I have Green Bay being one of the the NFC champion contenders. Not anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Yet another guy after a week like rife with injuries where it's like, oh, that's probably his season.
Hi, dog.
Hello, dog. Please shut up.
Yeah, and that being his season, that's pretty much the Packers' season.
Yeah.
But Minnesota Vikings, their defense got it done. I think with the Aaron Rodgers hit, they got it done a little too well.
Yeah.
Maybe borderlining on the quote unquote illegal / dirty hit. Now, my perspective on it is, I don't think it was a dirty play.
Okay.
He had momentum. Defenders are trained to hit people, but I am willing to say that it is, by the nature and the rules of the NFL, to drive a player into the ground.
Well,
and that is what I observed.
Right. So what I will say about it for my bit is, I didn't think it was necessarily a dirty hit until I watched it a couple of times, and it seems fully legal, except for, again, the driving him into the ground, and that's where it's like, okay, well, you took, he released it, and one of your feet was coming down, and then you put another one down, and you're allowed that, step or two, and you wrapped him up, but you kind of leaned into it, and at that point...
Yeah, as soon as he was within contact of Aaron Rodgers, he not necessarily launched, but he lunged into the hit.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things where it's a detriment to the game when players like Aaron Rodgers get injured like this.
Yeah.
I think we're pushing towards the illegal hit kind of argument here. The only reason I won't call it a dirty hit, because I think dirty plays are plays where the defender intends on hurting the other player.
Right.
And I don't think that's what went on here. I think it was momentum and adrenaline. He carried through it, and he was trying to take out Aaron Rodgers. He was trying to hit the quarterback.
I think it was a 300-plus pound guy who, while he could not have fully stopped his momentum, could have theoretically done something. And like you said, he didn't launch, but when you're at that weight and you catch somebody at that angle, it sort of falls into the weird gray area of it's technically legal, but it really sucks. I think the other argument is, if Aaron Rodgers is in the pocket at the time, things get assessed differently. Because,
sure. As soon as he broke the pocket, he loses a majority of his protection,
right?
Because he can take off as a runner.
He becomes effectively a runner.
Yeah. But besides that, the game was relatively uneventful. Case Keenum had a decent day.
Yeah.
And the rushing game was average on both sides of the ball. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers is much better than Brent Hundley, and I still don't know who that guy is.
Right.
So. Colin Kaepernick for Green Bay. Let's do it.
Colin Kaepernick for fucking anywhere at this point.
Cleveland. God, sign him.
Yeah, I mean, they could use him. All right, rolling down the list. Patriots at the Jets. Another game where I feel like the Patriots squeaked by and didn't actually deserve to win that game.
Yeah, you think?
I try to sometimes. The Jets start the game off 14-0. The Pats finally get on the board with 5 minutes left in the first half. Then a pair of interceptions get traded. So Tom Brady has 30 seconds left in the half, which is too much time because he's still Tom Brady.
Yep. He's a much more pedestrian-looking Tom Brady, but he still is Tom Brady.
Well, not with that pass to Brandon Cooks that he floated over his shoulder from, the 45-yard line to the 2.
Yeah, I mean, when you have somebody like Brandon Cooks and decent touch on your pass, look, that's a pass any quarterback can make with that amount of separation.
So, going into halftime, the Patriots go from down 14 to within 5 minutes having the game tied. Then they get the ball back and drive down the field and score another one. So the game is suddenly 21-14, and then all of a sudden the bullshit starts happening.
Yes, and it happened in droves. Are we going to sit here and not question the fact that all challenges or reviewed calls have to be sent up to New York? We're talking about a sole entity that is controlled by the NFL is calling every single game in the NFL this year. And when we've seen turnovers on calls like that, it makes me go, huh.
My opinion on the New York office is basically that I have largely agreed with them up to this point, and everybody makes mistakes. And I think while it's also incredibly unfortunate that they decided to go along with it, I think the commentator at the time's analysis of it was that it was paralysis by analysis, where they spent an unbelievable amount of time looking at this one play that the rule book says unless you have, I think now the wording is like overwhelming evidence, like
It's
play
it's
stand.
Yeah, it's irrefutable evidence.
I think that was the old one. I think they changed it slightly, but yeah, it's basically the exact same thing.
Yeah, if they make a call on the field, you can't overturn it unless it's 100% for sure that's what happened. And that's why the review process occurs. And the sheer fact that two things that bug me about the call. A, they overturned it. B,
Right.
that the head referee was just like, well, I felt like it was an easy call to make. It's like, are you fucking blind?
Right.
Like, are you literally blind? Because they had the perfect angle at the ball, and you can obviously see him lose possession as he crossed the goal line, and then regain possession before he hit the ground in the end zone.
Well, and the whole point of it for me is that initially it was called a touchdown to begin with, so you should be starting from that basis.
Right. So the basis you should start at is, hey, why is this not a touchdown? And there was not enough evidence. There was no obstruction. They could see the ball for the entire play.
Right.
What evidence do we have to say that this isn't a touchdown? And the problem is there fucking wasn't any.
Yep.
There just wasn't any. And the fact that the NFL's office in New York made that call, and then the head official was just like, well, I felt like it was an easy call to make. It's just like, you guys are dumb, aren't you? Like, you're really dumb. And then the NFL's head official guy of officiating came out and made his statement, and it pretty much said most of the same thing. But none of it provided any rationale for why they overturned the call.
Right. There seemed to be no clarity.
Right.
On
They
it.
didn't make an attempt to elaborate on their point. When you have a bunch of angry fans and a bunch of analysts sitting there scratching their heads going like, what just happened?
Yeah.
And the only thing I will say in that call's defense, though, is that's not what lost the Jets the game. No, it's not what lost the Jets the game. They were within a score, and they had another possession before the end of the game.
Well,
It made it substantially more difficult.
that ended up really changing the course of the game, because if they score that touchdown, they tie it up 21-21. So
Yeah.
later on in the game, they end up going for a pass play on a 4th and 1, which gets intercepted when they were inside of their 30.
Sure. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not saying it didn't affect the game in one way or the other, is whether changing up the Jets' game plan or whatever they had to do to stay relevant in that game, but it's not what lost them the game. Because they still had the ability to come back and tie it up or go for a win. It didn't break their back.
It's not what lost them the game in the sense that there was still time on the clock. Other than that, I think this is one of the few times that I think it's a major momentum changer that, the whole thing in football is like, oh, one play doesn't lose you the game, but I don't know. You turn over the ball in the end zone, and that's a huge deal. Just across many factors, especially when it causes a delay in the game for as long as they were looking at it.
Absolutely. And when it comes to, the rule being as asinine as it is, where, if you turn over the ball in the end zone but the fumble goes out of bounds, it's a touchback for the defensive team.
Yeah, that's a weird that's a weird rule that we've run into several times this season already.
Like, if Matt Forte was at midfield and fumbled the ball out of bounds, he just gets the ball out of bounds.
And on top of that, if it goes forward, he gets those yards.
Yeah, if it bounces forward, he gets those yards. But if it happens in the end zone, that's not only is it a change of possession, they get a touchback.
Yeah.
And with it's definitely a weird rule that we're running into. But at the same time, back in the olden days, an incomplete pass in the end zone was a touchback. So,
wow, yeah.
They changed that rule to emphasize the passing game because there's too many runners.
New rule: if you fumble it in the end zone and it goes out of bounds, it's a safety, and you have to free kick it, but you still get 2 points. We're flipping.
Yeah, why not?
We're flipping the whole thing around. You get 2 points. You don't get the touchdown, but you have to free kick it like a punt.
Yeah, and that's another good point. But though, by bringing it up, if the shoe is on the other foot, and like if the offensive team fumbles it through their own end zone, that's a safety, and they turn the ball over.
Yep.
But if you fumble the ball through your opponent's end zone, they still get the ball like that. Yeah. I guess that's a way to think about it, where it's kind of even on both sides, but there are points involved on the other side. Anyways, we could probably talk about that forever.
Oh God, no! I couldn't. I would lose my goddamn mind. I can barely talk about it for as long as we were talking about it. Can we move on to the 49ers and the Redskins, please?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, tell me about that game, because it's another one that you watched and I didn't, which seems to be the trend for this week.
Jesus. 49ers and the Redskins was a game. Sure, certainly was.
That we were talking about this in the pre-show, I guess is what we call that, where we sit on Discord and talk to each other.
Yep.
And watch highlights at the same time. It seems to be a very average week of football.
Yeah, there wasn't anything besides the ridiculous defensive showing from the Saints. It was like, this is just your average week of football. No one was overtly impressive. Kirk Cousins made another decent statement to why he should get paid more money or get paid an actual extended contract.
Keep his ass out of Buffalo. I don't want him.
There's a decently sized group in Cleveland that are just like, well, we'll take Kirk Cousins.
Yo, y'all can have him.
Yeah, I don't want to spend that money on him.
Yeah.
He's going to want a lot of money.
Exactly.
And we're already paying Brock Osweiler way too much money to play for Denver.
I'm not going to pay a sub Joe Flacco, sub Eli Manning quarterback. You know,
he's putting up better numbers than both of them this year.
Yeah, win a Super Bowl and then we'll talk.
Dude, Eli and Flacco won the Super Bowl on the backs of their number one defenses.
Sure.
So
which is the only reason they get paid like they do. See, I'm still trying to make a point here.
Yeah, so Brian Hoyer got benched, so CJ Beathard took the majority of the snaps for the 49ers, which I don't know who that guy is.
Most people don't know who Brian Hoyer is, so...
I do.
Well, yes. You and I do.
Yes.
Because we spent years before this podcast existed. As if there ever was a time. There's only been the Fourth and Wrong podcast and nothing before...
No sports ever before this podcast.
The Earth was formed 6.5 weeks ago. Yep. And
it was flat.
Yeah. Well, that's the only way you could get the football fields like that. It's weird, though, because they got that bump in the middle. Or at least, Giant Stadium has that bump. But we don't talk about that.
It was just an average football game. Not a huge amount of turnovers. Not any huge amount of offense. Like, Kirk Cousins threw for over 300 yards, so that's cool. Terrell Pryor is consistently showing that it was a really bad idea to leave Cleveland because nobody's ever going to utilize them the way we did because they already have better receivers on their team, but I'm not bitter.
Well, if we want to talk about consistently showing things, let's transition into the next game, which is the Ravens consistently showing that they aren't as good as we thought they were in the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, I was really expecting...
Also, before we get started, shout out your boy Mitch Trubisky getting his first NFL win.
Hell yeah. And he only threw for 50%, but he only had 16 attempts. So. Because Jordan Howard carried the ball 36 times.
You know what he didn't have?
What's that?
2 interceptions and no touchdowns.
He did not have that. Tariq Cohen had a completion for a touchdown. So there goes Chicago doing that weird-ass, faking it stuff again.
Who do they think they are, Kansas City? Don't they know that stuff doesn't win? I mean, clearly, the Chiefs lost this week, so that stuff doesn't work.
Yeah, it must not work, even though the Chiefs are, 5-1. Whatever. You're not an expert. What do you know?
The day someone calls me an expert, I will laugh at them. Or demand an increase in my salary. Or both. Yeah.
Did you see the play that Tariq Cohen made?
No.
It was cool. It was like a little pitch, and then
was it a pitch, Trubisky?
It was a pitch from Mitch, and then Tariq Cohen just perfect float into the corner of the end zone, and it was pretty. It looked like Tariq Cohen's been playing quarterback for years.
Are we talking like a root beer or like an orange?
Definitely root beer is classic. It's just a classic touch pass.
I was gonna say when you end the game with with a 100 QBR and a 158.3 rating,
Hey, man.
I guess you threw that one pass.
Yeah, that one pass was so good.
He should never throw a pass ever again and just be like, hey,
he can finish his career with a perfect passer rating.
I bet somebody else has got that already, which is unfortunate.
But Dontari Poe, maybe? Dontari Poe has a passing touchdown.
Probably.
As far as the Bears and Ravens game go, the numbers are slightly misleading. Is if you look at it at face value, because Mitch Trubisky did not have nearly as bad of a game as his numbers suggest. They just obviously limited the offense and his responsibility. Jordan Howard carried the ball 36 times.
I was going to say, no. As a Buffalo fan, 8 for 16 is not bad. It's efficient.
Yeah, that's just normal.
It's not great. The number, he wants to get those numbers up to like 13 for 16, 12 for 16 at least. But when your running back, takes it 167 yards and still averages 4.6 on 36 carries, it's not bad.
Yeah, you can afford to take some weight off the shoulders of your quarterback, which is surprising because of how stout the Baltimore Ravens defense is supposed to be. Jordan Howard was just running it down their throat all fucking day.
Okay, and then it's another game where it's like, oh, a defensive touchdown, and then some field goals.
Yep. Yeah, Chicago wasn't the greatest at pushing the ball downfield when it came to not running it, but Mitch Trubisky he didn't have any turnovers. He had 2 fumbles, but he lost 1, so I guess technically he was responsible for a turnover. He had a fumble that he lost, but he also recovered a fumble as well as somebody else's. He had 2 fumble recoveries. So I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, he was the one that recovered Cody Whitehair's fumble in the backfield.
Uh-huh.
So good on him. That kind of makes up for his lost fumble.
A little bit.
I guess. Yeah.
Definitely helps.
Yeah, it definitely helps. So he was efficient at not losing the game, and then the defense and the running game really pushed it over the plateau.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you have 2 fumbles and 2 recoveries, it's like, okay, well, you caught your own. It's like, no, but he lost one. It's like, oh, so he did something to unfuck this game. Okay.
Yeah, he contributed. 113 of those 340 yards from scrimmage are technically his.
And Joe Flacco looking pedestrian as hell.
Yeah, looking really bad. Like, how the hell do you have 41 attempts and 24 completions, but only 180 yards passing? We've used this term before. He was dinking and planking.
Yeah, planking and dinking.
Yeah, planking and dinking.
There's no dunking there.
There is absolutely no dunking there.
Excuse me. Yeah, when your longs are like 17, 16, and then the lower teens, yeah, there's no, like, when you don't get anything over 20.
Yeah. And there was no help from the rushing game whatsoever. As a collective, they did fine, but there wasn't like that breakout rusher that really carried the rushing game on his shoulders.
Right, again, the longest play on offense from their entire team was a 30-yard rush, which was like almost half of their leading rusher's yards.
Right. He got almost all of his yards on chunk yards. You take away that big play, we're talking about 14 attempts for 44 yards, so we're in the ballpark of 3.5 yards per attempt.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not good.
That's not good.
No, it's not good.
You don't get first downs like that. You get 4th and inches like that.
Right, and that 30-yard play.
And you know where that leaves you, right?
Where's that?
In your play calling, it leaves you 4th and wrong.
I still hate your joke. Yeah, 2 of Baltimore Ravens' touchdowns were on defense. They literally had no other touchdowns in this entire game.
That's bad.
Yeah, 2 defensive touchdowns. I do know it went to overtime, and that was when Mitchell Trubisky shined the most because they got the ball back, drove it downfield into field goal range, and won the game. So although he didn't put the team on his back to win this game, he definitely didn't do anything to lose it for him. So far,
he's Tyrod Taylor.
He's Tyrod Taylor. He's not E.J. Manuel quality yet.
Yeah.
As long as he doesn't dip into Deshaun Kaiser ranges, I think the Bears will be okay.
He's got to get that hard count before he can be E.J. Manuel quality.
And then that's the only thing they'll use him for.
Next up on the list, the thing that you were talking about pretty much all season.
What's that?
Adrian Peterson.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Adrian Peterson and still having gas in the tank Like a lot,
Yeah,
a lot of
buddy.
it apparently.
Yeah, well, I kept saying that, he's been underutilized with the Saints because the Saints have Drew Breeses and they're just going to want to throw on all over the place. And Sean Payton is a shitty fucking coach if he doesn't understand the fact that Adrian Peterson does not share carry. He is the feature back. You give him the ball and he'll run it down everyone's throat for 100 yards a game. That's what AP does. That's what he's always done. And there was nothing to ever indicate to me that he could not come back from this injury and do what he normally does, considering he's already done it once before.
And what did he do?
He won the MVP.
No, I mean this week.
Oh, this week?
He won the
100
MVP.
Yeah, he won the MVP for this week. I wouldn't be surprised if he was the NFC Offensive Player of the Week. He was that good. 26 carries for 130-plus yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. And they didn't try to utilize him in the passing game. They didn't need to because Larry Fitzgerald was too busy being a living legend.
It's true.
Like, this looked very, very, very much like 2014 Arizona Cardinals, where everybody thought they were going to win the Super Bowl.
Also, Larry Fitzgerald is like 4,000 years old at this point.
Right.
I feel like
he's slow as shit, but no one can cover him.
I feel like my grandfather was telling me about seeing Larry Fitzgerald when he came out of the draft. Like,
he won't die. You can't kill him off.
like it's like, okay, Larry Fitzgerald is the like time locked constant of the NFL, where it's like, oh yeah, Larry Fitzgerald, 10 or 11 catches for like 120 yards every single week, no matter what, always.
Yep. It looked very vintage Cardinals. By vintage, I mean like Cardinals from 3-4 years ago. And Carson Palmer, man, he had a game, dude.
Ah, yes, we have the vintage Cardinals. 2014 was a great year.
Perfectly aged.
I would recommend some brie and a light cracker.
So are football analysts like football sommeliers?
I think it's pronounced sommelier.
Whatever. It's not pronounced how it's spelled.
And the answer is no. Most of them have gotten hit in the head too many times. Oh no, it's sommelier. It's like the country. I think that's
I'm one of them there wine sommeliers.
Oh God. Look at me. Look at me. I'm the taster now. God damn.
Yeah. So Carson Palmer had a really good game. 18 for 22, not too shabby.
Yeah, no shit.
Averaged 12 yards an attempt. Not too shabby.
That's a percentage right there. 18 for 22.
Yeah, that's certainly. I'm pretty sure he almost went perfect for the first half of the game.
Like Larry Fitzgerald, what are you doing dropping a quarter of the things that I missed? Yeah, it's like, well, I sneezed once or twice, so, eh.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like his top 2 receivers both missed one, and then he had a couple things that looked like they were shovels or just dump offs to people who had 1 target apiece. Other than that, Carson Palmer hitting everything.
Yeah, he was dropping dimes, and that coupled with Adrian Peterson running this is a game that Arizona could not lose. Like especially with Ryan Fitzpatrick in there chucking the ball around. It's amazing the Bucs did as well as they did.
And yet they tried real hard towards the end of this game if you look at the stat line.
Oh, absolutely. No, Tampa Bay, they lit it on fire during the fourth quarter. It's amazing how many points they were able to score in one quarter.
It's the curse of Ryan Fitzpatrick. He will appear on your team and make it so that you get really close to winning a lot. And but then you won't.
And then he'll throw 5 interceptions in a game.
You know what it is? It's the October ghost stories. Like, this is our campfire ghost story. It's the journeyman quarterback of years past of just like, he comes through and your starter gets injured.
Yeah. Well,
they're never the same. He'll stick around for a few years, but you won't make the playoffs.
And Ryan Fitzpatrick is very much like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
He's mediocre as fuck.
Yeah. I call him Fitzmagic when he has a good game and Fitztragic when he doesn't, which
Yeah.
I'm sure the rest of everybody does.
You were totally the first person to come up with that idea.
Absolutely not. But it's a tale of two quarterbacks when it comes to Fitzpatrick.
Oh, absolutely.
This is probably one of the more average games he's ever thrown.
What I will say is he's got Mike Evans, and he's good at throwing to wide receivers who wear the number 13.
Mike Evans only had 3 receptions on 8 targets, so
He also had 95 yards.
sure. So he was really bad at throwing to him, but when he was able to get the ball to him, he was wide open and had running room.
Then again, I'm gonna take this back to one of our earlier weeks. Ryan Fitzpatrick was 23 for 32. Jameis Winston was 5 for 10. So some of those were probably coming from Jameis earlier in the game.
It's possible, but it lends to the question: are the Buccaneers objectively better with Ryan Fitzpatrick or Jameis Winston?
Objectively, Ryan Fitzpatrick has been in the league for a very long time, is a pocket passing quarterback, and has done decent with pretty much every team he's been on. The Jets, the last couple of years, like, you remember Geno Smith? No, you don't, because he's playing with the Giants now.
Yep.
He got cracked in his jaw and then had his shoulder screwed up, which might have been Fitzpatrick's curse, but we can't prove that. We don't know what voodoo dolls he has yet.
It's just whatever quarterback's on the team he's playing for. He just goes get another new one made.
Like, Ryan Fitzpatrick is the most serviceable quarterback in the league. He will get you close, but unless you have something else to back him up, he's the most serviceable quarterback in the league. He is a poor man's Brett Favre.
Yeah, I can see that. He's certainly
is the way that I have always described him. He'll get you 3-4 touchdowns in a game, but he's gonna throw that interception that's gonna kill a drive.
Yeah, he definitely has a gunslinger mentality.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing I've always said about Josh McCown. Josh McCown's never afraid to stretch the field, but he's going to throw an interception eventually.
The problem with Fitzpatrick is he's got a gunslinger mentality without the cannon. Like, he's a little bit smarter, can read things a little bit better, but will still
he did go to Harvard.
Yes, which led to the first Harvard to Harvard touchdown in the NFL this game.
Smartest touchdown pass in the NFL.
Mm-hmm. One of his 3. But yeah, Fitzpatrick has always had that gunslinger, just, I'm going to put it in there. And the number of times where it's just like, that was a bad choice.
Yeah.
He's going to have those interceptions pretty much every game. A game where Ryan Fitzpatrick does not have an interception is an anomaly. Whereas a game where someone like Aaron Rodgers has an interception, is an anomaly.
Sure.
So
yeah, I can agree for that. I can agree with that statement for the most part.
Are they objectively better? Jameis Winston, hadn't been in the league that long. So is it better to have someone experienced than someone not experienced? Most of the time.
I think it's good that they have a quarterback that's backing up Jameis Winston that has experience in the league and also has won football games before.
Yeah, I think the most important thing to note about this whole situation is that Tampa Bay has a legitimate backup quarterback. Ryan Fitzpatrick has ended up starting for a lot of teams, including the Bills for 3 years, including the Jets for 2 years, including Cincinnati. Like, he's started and wrapped up seasons tons of times.
Absolutely.
So having him as your backup means that you have someone who can actually keep you in the fight, as opposed to so many teams where it's like, oh, we just keep drafting like late round rookies, and if somebody gets hurt, or like Green Bay seeing right now, like, who's their backup? I've never heard of this guy before. People have heard of Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's been around a lot, and he's been on a lot of teams, but he's also won games.
Yeah, it's definitely beneficial. Obviously, Tampa Bay is going to go back to Jameis Winston when he's healthy.
Yes.
I just think it's a good thought experiment because we are used to seeing Ryan Fitzpatrick start for so many teams, and to be able to see that level of offensive production, especially in one quarter, it's like, Ryan Fitzpatrick does have a certain set of skills that he brings to the table that is definitely advantageous to have as a backup quarterback, but he's forever going to be that journeyman backup or journeyman starter depending on what squad he's on.
He has a very particular set of skills, and he will get his daughter back. Okay, so coming up next on the docket is the other LA team versus the other Florida team. So we've got the Rams versus the Jags, and this
only you would make that point.
well, there's only one.
I didn't even think about it.
There's only one team in New York, so I got to pay attention to these things. It's a.
I mean, I see what you're saying, but it does say New York on their team.
Yeah, where do they play?
New Jersey.
Point made. Let me put. The Bills may not have scored a lot of points this week because they weren't playing, but that's one for them.
There you go. That's a win.
That's a win. So yeah, Rams Jags, largely an uneventful game after the first 30 seconds of gameplay.
Yeah, that spin move that the Rams returner put on the Jags was fucking awesome.
That was real mean. That's a real.
Yeah, he just ran into his blockers and was like, "I'm gonna spin out of this," and then does like I don't know. I was kind of when I was watching it, I was kind of like that shouldn't have worked. And then once he created some separation and started getting down the field, I was like, that shouldn't have worked.
Yeah.
But then, very next play for the Jags, Leonard Fournette.
Well, first play from scrimmage.
Yeah,
because the first touchdown, not even from scrimmage.
Yeah. So the Rams opened it up by a kick return touchdown, and then they kick off to the Jags, and then the very first play from scrimmage of the game, Leonard Fournette takes it 75 yards to the house.
It's not a bad way to start a game. Very exciting. This game.
Well,
I think
all it did was just burn 30 seconds off the clock, and now we're back to square one because they had to kick it back to the Rams.
Let's see. We got 60 times 60. That's 36. And we divide that by 2, and then we divide that by 7. So each team at the end of it should have had 257 points if they kept scoring like that.
That would have been something to watch.
Yeah, it would have.
Leonard Fournette would have been tired.
The Rams are a shootout team.
This was their week to prove it, coming out the gate like that.
Like more points than both teams combined at an NBA All-Star game.
Yep.
For one team.
That would have been pretty nuts.
At least I think I did that math right. It's my job to count things for a living, so I hope I did that right.
Yeah, I'm gonna take your word for it.
Yeah.
I don't doubt you.
But yeah, it seemed like a pretty average game. Other than that, it was except for the point where the Jacksonville Jaguars kicker was like 1 for 3 and should have been 0 for 3, but on his second field goal attempt, he kicked it and he missed, but the Rams called a timeout. Or no, I'm sorry, that wasn't it. He kicked it and he missed, and then the Rams were offsides.
Right.
And then he kicked it again, and he made it, and Jacksonville had a false start on the play. So it was like a 41-yard field goal that it was like, all right, now we're going to move it forward 5 yards, and he kicked it and he made it, and it was like, nope, move it back 5 yards. Now kick it again. And on the third one, he made it. So technically he made 2 out of 3, but the way that it counts for points, he only made 1 out of 3, and it was like, Jesus, I sent you a message. I was like, this poor guy. Like, forget icing a kick. The Rams should have just called a timeout there just to see what happened at that point. It's like, well, he made the last one. Like, move him back and ice him. Like, whatever. Let's just really screw with this guy.
Right. Let's see if we can make him go 50%.
But, it ended up not mattering because the Rams still ended up pulling out the win. Jared Goff. Again, you want to talk about, like, weird low stats. Jared Goff, 11 for 21, 124 yards and a touchdown.
Yeah, well, their defense scored 2 touchdowns, so he didn't really have to do much.
Maybe that's the trend for the week, is not that it's the most average, but it's super...
The defenses are doing all the work.
Yeah, it's all the secondaries and stuff doing everything. To be fair, Todd Gurley, still 116 yards, averaging 5 yards a carry.
Yeah, Todd Gurley looks like rookie year form, which is nice because I really like to watch him play. And I feel like that's been a very, very, very good benefit for Jared Goff because he doesn't have to do as much.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And Leonard Fournette, doing what he do to a certain degree, wasn't super productive after that run at the very beginning, but still
Yeah,
ended up with a decent average. But that's again one of the things is what is sustained over the course of the game, which I think is why you and I look at it and are like, if you discount this, it actually wasn't that great of a game.
Yeah, if you take away that 70-yard scamper, that 75-yard scamper away from him, we're talking about an average of like 2.5 to 3 yards per carry. So not crazy.
So this is the other game with the Jets-Pats game where the refs like really influenced it a lot. There was
I know there was a big blown like PI call.
Yeah, this was a game that I actually watched. It was a third down play that would have easily, pass interference gets you 15 yards, and they would have easily gotten a first down.
Sure.
Where Marquise Lee got a pass thrown to him, and Nickel Roby-Coleman, former Buffalo Bill, shout out him again. Don't have a lot to talk about for the Bills, so gotta do something.
Throw him in there.
Got a pass interference call. Wait, shit. Maybe I shouldn't have said anything about that. It like clearly on the replay, like contact early, grabbed his arm, pulled it away from his body. No call on the play. And Lee was livid, and it was not the only call that they missed against Lee that game. And by the end of it, he was like just screaming at everyone. Like he ends up 5 receptions on 10 targets with 83 yards. He could have easily broken 100 and had like 2 to 3 more catches.
Sure.
So they missed that, and that missed pass interference call, which would have given them a new first down, ends up bringing up fourth down where the Jaguars have to punt. The Rams block said punt and run it in for a touchdown.
Savage.
Yeah. So it goes from we should have had a first down to, now the other team has 7 points.
Stuff like that kind of bugs me. I mean, people say, like you said with the last conversation about, bad calls, one play doesn't make the game, but it helps. And it's a deflating play, and it's a momentum shift, especially when the Rams aren't really ticking that hard on offense. They only had 1 offensive touchdown. So just to tack on another defensive/special teams touchdown onto a team that's playing relatively mediocre to average offensively, it can kind of deflate what you're trying to attempt to do on offense on the other side of the ball.
Right, and there's a difference between like missing a holding call on a 3rd and 12 when you're on your own 30 versus missing a call that leads to either, in the Jets' case, a touchback, or in this case, a touchdown for the opposing team when you should have had a first down.
Sure. Anytime it changes, anytime it results in a loss of possession or the potential loss of possession, it's an issue.
I think it's more when it adjusts when who's got points on the board.
Yeah.
Because, that goes from a continued drive to a complete swing the other direction. And it's not the only call that the refs totally boned up in that game. So, Robert Woods, former Buffalo Bill, shit, I got to stop starting like this because the next thing's bad. Had one of his receptions punched out. And initially... So it's the traditional thing where it's like, okay, the defensive player scoops it up and runs it downfield, and it's like, oh, they blew it dead because it was, a dropped pass. But no, this dude, like Robert Woods, caught it, turned, took 2 steps, and then got it punched out before he hit the ground. So
made a football move.
Yeah, so not an incomplete pass, which is what they ruled it initially, but then B, Jacksonville gets the ball back but doesn't get the return yards. So Woods was like by himself in the middle of the field with 3 defenders around him, and 2 of them started running upfield. So this dude had at least 1 blocker and would have gotten at least 15 or so return yards. Instead, they just get the ball at the spot after the challenge. So
right, because they blew the return dead.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, that sucks.
So this is one of those games where, I like how the Rams are playing so far.
Sure.
But, that was probably another game Jacksonville should have walked away with the W on.
Probably.
So, I don't know. Yep. I think Jacksonville is showing that they're more of a team. We'll have to see how. I haven't checked in on it, but Leonard Fournette also suffered an injury in that game. I don't think he came back after that point, but basically on one of his runs, he planted his foot real hard and hyperextended his ankle. So he was
those are scary.
Yeah, he was able to walk off under his own power. He didn't get carted off or anything, but it's one of those things where that could easily turn into a long-term nagging situation, and
totally.
those are never good for literally any skill position player.
Right. Even more so like strong power backs like him.
Yeah.
Because his plant he's a running back, so his legs are his bread and butter.
Yep. Yeah. Very much so.
I still think Blake Bortles is terrible, and they need a new quarterback. And the fact that they're ignoring that position is astonishing to me.
I think it's another one of those things where the quarterback is sort of being elevated. I think Jared Goff will probably develop into an actually good quarterback, and this is another one of those situations in the podcast where I changed my direction really quickly, and it's going to sound like an edit, but it wasn't. That's just how I talk, so shut up and deal with it. But Blake Bortles is probably another one of those quarterbacks who is being elevated by the players around him. And again, it's a situation where he's got a running back who's showing up this year. The Rams have Todd Gurley. He's got Leonard Fournette. And he's got some good weapons around him in Marquise Lee. So sometimes skill position players make you look better.
Yeah.
Most of the times, that's the big thing is if you've got a mediocre quarterback, if you've got good skill position players, they'll make them look better. If you've got a great quarterback, he'll make everyone around him look better. That's why people like Chris Hogan go for 195 yards in an AFC Championship game because they play with Tom Brady.
And then do shit all year.
Okay, so moving on to the next game. Here's your gloat game, Keith. You can start off with this. How you doing about gloating?
I'm upset about it. But I will still.
Which reason are you more upset about? The Steelers winning or the Chiefs losing?
I'm more upset about the Chiefs losing, honestly.
Really? Well, I guess at this point in the season, you don't really have a lot to fight for on the other side of things.
Yeah, it's not like I'm in contention for the AFC North at this point. So as much as I like to watch the Steelers lose, I would much just prefer to watch the Chiefs win. And they just happened to play each other this week, so I couldn't have. I mean, I could have my cake and eat it too, and it just didn't occur. So Ben Roethlisberger is kind of eating his own words right now, though, because the conversation he had last week with the media, like, oh, maybe I just don't have it anymore, blah, blah, blah. And then this week he was like, well, it looks like I got a little more gas in the tank. It's like, dude, these kind of reflections are not meant for you to give to the media. Like,
listen,
if you need to some self-reflection, like, come on, dude, you're the leader of this offense. Like,
we get it.
Show some confidence.
We get it. You've never had to woo a girl that way, but you undersell and over-deliver, okay?
Antonio Brown has way too many receptions and receiving yards. He makes me uncomfortable. Le'Veon Bell is looking like Le'Veon Bell again, so I think he's making a hard case to the Steelers of why he should have got paid more money, even though he locked himself out and was just like, hey, pay me something better. And then, bottom line is, everybody always questions Alex Smith's ability to come back and win games when things aren't necessarily going his way. That's something they've always talked about last season, and that was one of the big reasons why they drafted Mahomes is they're like, we want to see somebody that can stretch the field instead of manage the game. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it takes a young rookie sitting behind you, a young rookie with a cannon sitting behind you to be like, all right, I got to show these guys something. And he's been putting out. Alex Smith has been having stellar games all season. This one kind of got away from him, but he wasn't an inefficient passer, and he wasn't an inefficient game manager. The Pittsburgh's defense is stingy as fuck. They really are. And I feel like, especially towards the end of the game, he was able to overcome and put themselves in KC in a position where they could win. They outscored Pittsburgh in the second half of the game, and there was one specific play that really, 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 really should have been an interception that just kind of sealed it for Pittsburgh.
Also, Pittsburgh being stingy, I think, can number one be emphasized by Kareem Hunt with 21 yards and a long of 5.
Right, most explosive running back / rookie running back of the year. and they were able to hold him to 21 yards rushing. Now they couldn't hold him coming out of the backfield. He still got more than 100 yards from scrimmage. Just 89 of them happened to be on reception. It's kind of to be expected from Kareem Hunt at this point. He could play any position. The real big thing was Antonio Brown was owning the seams.
Yeah.
They could not cover him in the seams and towards the post, post routes, little seam routes. They could not match up anybody with Antonio Brown and keep him contained.
When your main dude receiving goes for over $150 and your main dude rushing goes for over $150, it's hard to lose games like that most of the time.
Yeah, it really is, especially when you're not turning the ball over. Ben Roethlisberger threw a pick. Mm-hmm. It should have been 2 picks, but he threw a pick. But that was their only turnover of the game. So if you're putting up those kind of numbers, and it's really hard to lose.
I was going to say, Antonio Brown had a fumble, but seemingly recovered it.
Yes. Alex Smith had a lot more to overcome in this game, and I think he showed why he should be considered, a legit quarterback in the NFL when he rallied the team. He rallied the team to take a 2-point lead, and then off of some bullshit, the Steelers were able to put the game away.
That was some absolute nonsense of a play.
We've mentioned it twice, so we'll explain the scenario. Pretty much, Ben Roethlisberger takes the snap. Antonio Brown's running what appeared to be just a go route down the sideline,
Ben
Roethlisberger tries to rocket it between coverage. There wasn't a lot of separation between Antonio Brown and the corner, but there was a decent amount of separation. But he was really trying to split the defenders.
He's also effectively double covered with the cornerback trailing him and the safety coming in from the top.
The safety was coming in over top. He hit the right window, but the pass shouldn't have been where it was.
He just also hit his own player.
Yeah, Kansas City's cornerback jumps up and literally has hands in the proximity of the ball, and as he's closing his hands around the ball, it just slips right through his hand and ricochets right into Antonio Brown.
It bounced off his helmet.
Yeah, it slipped through his hand. Yeah. He slipped through his hands, bounced off his helmet, and landed right into Antonio Brown's hands. And all Antonio Brown had to do, he corralled the ball in. All he had to do was shake the safety, and he was off to the races. And of course, AB can do that.
Yeah, he had the one other safety to beat to the corner basically at that point, because when you watch the play, it looks like the 2 other defenders just basically bounce off each other.
Yeah, the other safety got an angle on him, but by then it was a race to the corner, and there was no pursuit angle that would have stopped AB.
He fast.
Yeah, he's super fast. So that was a backbreaker for Kansas City, because if they would have got that pick, they could have easily milked the clock for the win. And it's plays like that it's a freak accident. It really is. Mm-hmm. But you can still attribute it to the capabilities of Antonio Brown because of his awareness and his ball skills.
Yeah.
He saw the ball get tipped up. He had to reach out and corral that ball. It just so happened it was in his catch radius, in his proximity.
It's one of those situations where you look at it and it's like, oh, that was incredibly lucky, but then you look at it a second time and it's like, yeah, but a lesser wide receiver would not have caught that.
Yeah, they would have bumbled it and dropped it, or they wouldn't even recognize the ball was tipped up.
Right, or they throw their hands behind them, but they throw them in the wrong place so that they don't actually catch it. And
I mean, AB has some outstanding ball skills. We've seen him do some incredible stuff with the football in very tight spaces. So this is obviously a play that we would expect from Antonio Brown. It's just unfortunate because it kind of deflated my whole gloat about Kansas City theory.
Uh-huh.
But I can confidently say, still running the AFC rather, and still doing better than the Raiders. So I can still gloat a little bit.
Sure. I mean, again, I threw that towel in a long time ago.
Yeah. But, I mean, this was a loss to the team that knocked them out of the playoffs last year. The Pittsburgh Steelers have the Chiefs' number at this point. They beat them in regular season last year and knocked them out of the playoffs last year. So this was one of those games where it's the team that I expect them to be playing in the AFC conference round at the end of the year. I just think the Chiefs are going to figure it out this year versus getting knocked out.
I guess we'll see when we get to that point.
Hopefully. That's the game I want to watch for the AFC Championship.
I want to see Kansas City not in the playoffs, but I have my own reasons for that.
Because you really, really want that draft pick to not be bad?
I would love a draft pick, man, at this point. Man.
I mean, it'll still be a draft pick.
I want 2 wide receivers, goddammit.
Lord knows you need them at this point.
Or 2 offensive linemen, hopefully a right guard and a right fucking tackle.
Your blindside guy's doing good?
I might cut that out. No. They're still
So maybe you need a left guard and a left tackle, too.
No, well, I mean, our left guard is Richie Incognito. Our left tackle is Cordy Glenn. He's just injured a lot. Probably need a new center sometime soonish. Well, let's talk about the Thrilla in Los Zilla. Actually, technically it was in Oakland, so let's talk about the Battle by the Bayside? I'll figure something out.
Yes, we'll talk about the Oakland game.
Yeah, Chargers-Raiders. Let's talk about it. Hey, the Raiders are bad, apparently. I don't know. I thought they were going to be real good. Derek Carr's back.
Well,
what's their excuse?
Well, every indication from last season would dictate that they're supposed to be really good. But when Derek Carr comes back from an injury but literally throws 2 picks and can't find the end zone worth a damn, you start to question it a bit.
Yeah, I mean, we look down the list and, 21 for 30 for, 171 yards. That's low. That's low.
Yeah,
that's a check down quarterback.
Yeah, and that would normally be, not necessarily unimpressive, but that would normally be, a stat line that we wouldn't necessarily chastise until you get to the interceptions part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And if it wasn't for those turnovers, we would have been like, all right, Derek Carr's first game back from injury, blah, 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 blah. We can still say that, but this is also Derek Carr we're talking about. This is somebody we expected to be, one of the front runners for, AFC Offensive Player of the Year.
Yeah, totally.
So seeing him coming back from the injury, it's a little disheartening, especially because none of us expected him to be back so early. So does this have anything to do with the injury, or is just Derek Carr not being as productive as we thought he could be?
Yeah,
did he overperform last year because of the weapons he's surrounded with?
I think it's hard to say that per se. You gotta throw with your whole upper body, and your back's part of it. So I would argue at this point, this is probably a young guy who says, I want to come back from this injury quick because last season ended with a broken leg, which isn't something you can come back from super quick. But again, when this had a 2 to 6 week time frame, he's like, well, I want to beat that. So honestly, my guess is this is a guy who is young and wants to battle through this and came back way, way too soon instead of just taking another loss.
Yeah, we're not talking about an injury like, a sore non-throwing arm or something like that. Like, he had a legitimate fracture in his back.
Yeah.
And he took a week off, and we're supposed to expect him to be okay.
Well, yeah, he took a week off. The following week, he was, at practice by Wednesday and was throwing on Thursday.
Right. So by all accounts, a week and a half.
Yeah, that's not...
that doesn't seem right.
Yeah.
Especially when the window was 2 to 6 weeks, and I thought the 2 weeks of that 2 to 6 week window was still I'm seeing more like 4 weeks is the earliest we can expect him. But no, he's back in a week and a half, and then we see this showing from the Raiders, and it was like, can we have EJ Manuel back? At least we expect him to be terrible.
Yeah, I mean, at least with that, you get the scapegoat of and again, EJ Manuel can pop up against bad teams. Look at Phillip Rivers and his numbers: a touchdown, a fair amount of yards, nothing out of the rushing game. This is one of those situations where I look at this and I'm like, the Chargers didn't win this game, the Raiders lost it. Especially when you're playing at home in the black hole. Neither one of these teams has showed up to be spectacular in their division up to this point, but Oakland shouldn't be losing this game. Though again, it's also another week where Marshawn looks human.
I think human, not so much. I think Marshawn looked good. I mean, if you look at his numbers, 13 carries for 63 yards. He was averaging 5 yards a carry, but they only let him touch the ball 13 times. It's something I've been saying week in and week out. Let him run the ball.
It's true.
It's the same thing I was saying about AP, and then Adrian Peterson goes out and runs 140 yards for 2 touchdowns when they give him the ball, when they feature him as the back.
So what you're saying is we should bring Marshawn back to Buffalo.
Fuck it, bring Marshawn back to Buffalo.
That'll never happen. He won't ever do that.
And give Cleveland LaShawn McCoy.
No. Also, if you legitimately wanted to talk about the number one, like, 1-2 punch in the league, I think LaShawn McCoy and Marshawn Lynch would be the best 2 running backs that have the most varied style that can still destroy it on a single play.
Yeah, I don't think Marshawn's being pedestrian at all. I think he's being underutilized.
So moving on to Sunday night, the highlight of every week, that is a Giants game in prime time. I don't know why we're giving teams that haven't won a game yet this season primetime games when the Bills are playing at 1 or 4 o'clock if they're on the West Coast. But, whatever. We get Thursday night against the Jets, so look forward to that. Look forward to this version of the colorblind game. Whatever.
When they made the schedule, they were expecting the New York Giants to be, like, the guys in the NFC East, okay?
Doesn't mean it doesn't piss me off.
Well, they won, so there you go.
Yeah, so the Giants finally unlost a game. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I mean, they won a game.
Unlost a game.
In spite of losing 3-4 wide receivers, all of their wide receivers.
Yep. Well, Eli Manning passed the ball significantly less times.
Yeah, it seems like a very similar case to the Eagles game.
Yeah, defense scored twice.
Yeah.
Offense only scored once.
Thursday night and Sunday night had a very similar trajectory.
Yep. All Eli Manning had to do was not fuck up because Orleans Darkwa was running the ball like a madman.
Yep.
And C.J. Anderson and Jamal Charles couldn't get shit formulated on the rushing game for the Broncos, so they pretty much had to shoulder everything on Trevor Siemian. And as far as I'm concerned, Trevor Siemian to me is still an unproven passer.
Yo, Trevor Siemian got beat so hard, I got reminded that Brock Osweiler is back on the Broncos.
Yep, and Cleveland's paying fucking $14 million of his salary.
I bet you're wondering how I got here.
I'm sad again.
Flashback from Brock Osweiler in a Broncos uniform to Brock Osweiler in a Broncos uniform.
But collecting Browns money.
Yeah, record scratch.
I'm sad.
I mean, I would be too. How's your quarterback situation in Cleveland right now? Oh wait, we talked about that at the beginning.
Right. I would take Brock Osweiler at this point.
Yeah, I bet you fucking would.
Let's give the poor guy a shot. Hell, we're paying him $14 million.
Yeah.
Might as well be wearing the right fucking uniform.
I'm sorry, you're not allowed to say poor guy to someone who's making $14 million a year while not playing for your team.
Look. Okay.
I get it.
You know what?
I get it. Turn a phrase. I understand.
Yeah. But you have a point.
He ain't that poor.
He ain't that poor. That's your point. I got it. Trevor Siemian. Trevor Siemian on the surface looks like he had a really good game until you look at how many times he had to throw the ball, and that sucks for that poor man's shoulders.
It was a lot.
Yeah, 50 times in a clip. Like, games should not occur that way. The quarterback should never have to be in a position where he has to throw the ball 50 times.
His back hurts from carrying that team.
Right, and of course, him being a relatively unproven passer, as far as I'm concerned, and him also throwing 2 interceptions, it put a lot of pressure on the defense, and the defense just wasn't what I'm used to seeing from Denver. They weren't bad. They limited the Giants' offense, but the defense from the Giants was just doing so much better. Yeah. So even though the Giants won, it was a relatively underwhelming win as far as offense is concerned. I mean, pretty much like Ben McAdoo turned over play calling to an offensive coordinator, and I feel like the offense coordinator was just like, hey, Eli, don't fuck up. We'll do the rest over here.
Pretty much.
And then Eli was like, okay, I can handle that. Yep. Demaryius Thomas had a really good game, and he probably is half the reason why I won in fantasy this year. Or this week, rather.
Well, hopefully that carries forward.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, actually, Demarius Thomas has been riding the bench for me. I had to put him in because AJ Green was on a bye. Moving on to Monday.
Monday, Monday, Monday. You paid for the whole seat, and you're gonna sit in it because you're at work.
Well, I mean, I'm at home.
Monday, Monday, Monday. Everybody hate Keith because he's at home. All right, let's talk Titans and Colts. Let's talk Jacoby Brissett. Let's talk Jacoby Brisket and how he's losing games.
He is certainly not Andrew Luck.
He's certainly the guy that the Bills went into Gillette Stadium against and handed them their first home shutout ever in that stadium. So thanks for that. Shout out.
Yeah.
And everybody was like, "Oh, the Patriots are falling apart." And it's like, you guys started 3-1 under this dude and Jimmy Garoppolo,
Right.
and then you lost one game to the Bills.
And then Tom Brady came back in and went like 10-1 or some shit like that.
He went enough to go to a Super Bowl and then win when he definitely
Yeah,
shouldn't have. So, really,
there's always that.
really, you got to bring up Tom Brady this late in the thing. I brought up Gillette Stadium. I wasn't talking about. We didn't have to go there.
My bad.
I didn't say the team.
My bad, dog.
What the hell?
My bad, dog.
All right, good. So, anyways.
Jacoby Brissett is certainly not Andrew Luck. Marcus Mariota is a really good quarterback. And Derrick Henry is an animal, and I love him.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I felt like Jacoby Brissett didn't play terribly. Again, I didn't watch this whole game because it kind of got away from me, and it was late, and I had to go to work.
Sure.
But from what I saw, like, I don't know, it looked like two dudes who were slinging the ball real hard, one that could move a little bit and one that like had a leg injury. So
yeah, it was another one of those games this week where it was, routine. The only reason the score looks kind of more dramatic than it really is because Derrick Henry broke out late for a 72-yard touchdown at the end of the game.
Mm-hmm.
If you wipe away that touchdown, he was averaging about 4 yards a carry, which still isn't bad, but his numbers are skewed based off of that one clip. But Derrick Henry is also one of those rushers that routinely breaks for those long runs, so it's less of a – I mean, it's still a defensive problem, but he has the capacity to create those plays.
Right.
And but the passing game was more or less just consistent for Mariota. I mean, he has Eric Decker.
Right.
Eric Decker is nothing but hands.
Jacoby Brissett has T.Y. Hilton, who only caught one pass for 19 yards, and that's definitely a far cry from what he's done earlier this season.
Yeah, T.Y. Hilton, it's definitely one of those underperformances of the year, considering T.Y. Hilton is traditionally his go-to receiver.
Right.
So it was interesting that he seemed to be targeting Jack Doyle and Dante Moncrief as much as he was. Maybe he just wasn't getting any separation. Who knows? I do know that everybody in my fantasy league that started T.Y. Hilton were pissed.
Understandably.
Yep. And in the 3 leagues I'm playing right now, every single one of them that started them, pretty much T.Y. Hilton is the reason why they lost. Because they usually expect at least 10 points from him, and they got 1.9.
That's not a lot.
That's not a lot. Delaney Walker almost cost me my week because I needed by the end of the week I had DeMarco Murray and Delaney Walker as my last 2 players I needed to play, and I needed at least 14 points from both of them. So I was like, I mean, Delaney can at least get like 30 yards and a touchdown, and DeMarco Murray can at least get 30 yards and a touchdown, and that will cover my 7 points per. No, Delaney Walker got 1.7 points, and then DeMarco Murray got 14 point something. So he pretty much just single-handedly won me the game this week.
Mm-hmm.
So that was nice. DeMarco Murray had a good showing from scrimmage. His rushing stats weren't very impressive, but he was 100% on receptions versus targets, and at least put up some yards on the ground. So his yards from scrimmage and his rushing touchdown definitely buffed his numbers a little bit.
I was going to say, Delaney Walker with his minus 3 yards, not probably helping that case.
Nope. But it was another one of those games where it was just like, this is average football. The team that should have won. and Mariota's consistently establishing himself as, a franchise option for the Titans, which is good. And the Colts really, really, really want Andrew Luck back. And that kind of leads into the next conversation I want to have, which is Andrew Luck hitting a snag in his recovery. Do you think that the Colts should just suck it up and just start Jacoby Brissett for the rest of the season? Because there's no point where Luck can come back at this point where he'll be ready to play at the level that they want him to play to keep them not necessarily competitive but relevant.
Well, their schedule involves the Jags, the Bengals, the Texans for the next 3.
Yeah.
So they play the Texans twice, they play the Jags twice, they play us at some point, they play the Ravens, who don't seem to be as great. There's the potential to salvage a season here. The real question is, can their offensive line keep Andrew Luck on his feet, and can their defense do anything? Or are you going to have an ailing Andrew Luck come into, a faltering offense and a defense that's currently allowing the most points per game in the league?
Right, and Jacoby Brissett was never sacked in this game, but he had 5 carries, so that speaks to me, especially with how their offensive line has been struggling, that they are utilizing Jacoby Brissett's physicality to protect him, his ability to scramble with the ball. Andrew Luck, he's an athlete, and he can stride it out when he needs to, but he's never been known. He's a drop back and throw at quarterback. He's a pocket passer. And the way the offensive line is playing right now, I don't really think, if it were me, if I had to make the decision, I would just bench Luck for the rest of the season. Just say, fuck it. Let Jacoby Brissett. Jacoby Brissett's not doing terrible. But he also doesn't have a lot of help. So how much of it is really his fault? Well, none of it, in my opinion. So I say bench him. Let Jacoby Brissett finish out the season. Let Andrew Luck recover to a point where it's not a question of what they're trying to do with the rest of their season. The time frame for Andrew Luck's return has now drastically changed once again. So there's always next year. And it's not even to say that the Colts were even going to be that competitive this year to begin with, especially with how their offensive line has been playing and how their defense has been playing.
Yeah, if you've got somebody who is serviceable at the time and you want to protect the future, it's probably your best direction to go. Well, do I think they could put Luck back in? It depends what condition he comes back in. And if you're going to put somebody who's back in at 80% for the rest of the season or less, then you're better off just having Jacoby in there and seeing what happens. Because at the very least, you accomplish 2 things at that point. You get to further evaluate him as a backup who is on your team at this point, because you just got him after, his rookie season with New England. So you got his contract for a while. So it allows you to evaluate him in that point. And it also, if he plays well, he gains himself more trade value for somebody else who's, in the next year looking for a team when they try and court the Patriots, who will never give up Garoppolo ever. So getting out of game-to-game talk and getting into greater things as we head towards the finish line of this week's podcast, there were a couple other extracurricular headlines that came out, one of which is Colin Kaepernick is filing a collusion claim against the NFL, saying that the owners all got together to stop him from having a job.
Well, that's not exactly what's going on.
A bunch of sentences that end with question marks at the end.
Yeah, what he's claiming is that there is collusion occurring. Now, collusion only has to occur between a few owners or the NFL and those few owners, or the league as a whole. So he's filing a grievance for collusion. I'm seeing this is a tough one because officially, I said it earlier in the year, but officially Kaepernick's never going to play in the NFL again. Period.
Keith is part of the collusion. You heard it here first on the Fourth and Wrong podcast. That's been our show. We'll see you next. Go on.
You're not going to file a grievance against the NFL and make accusations like this towards team owners and then expect to play for said teams. It's not going to happen. What makes it interesting is how the NFL is going to respond, because the last thing NFL wants to happen is for a higher official, most likely Roger Goodell, to have to give a disposition,
And
which is
I'm sorry. I think the other thing that's important to note is he's taking this directly. He's not doing it through like the players' union or anything.
so he's utilizing a private attorney that's defended other high-profile clients and pretty much circumventing the Players Association and going directly at the NFL. And so, like I said earlier, the last thing the NFL wants is a disposition from one of their head dudes, a sworn statement. They want to try to avoid that because then they're going to start asking questions and they're going to have to start giving answers under oath, and that's where things get a little gray. The other thing that the NFL doesn't want to happen is they don't want it to get to a point where they're required to turn over documentation.
Mm-hmm.
Because the moment they start turning over documentation, it's not what they find about collusion, it's what they find about other things going on in the NFL that can cause other problems for the NFL. So what's probably going to happen is the NFL is going to settle. They're not going to allow Kaepernick to prove collusion, because if they prove collusion,
doesn't he have to accept a settlement at that point?
Who?
Kaepernick?
He doesn't have to accept the settlement.
Right. Well, yes. For this to not go to court, though, he would have to accept said settlement.
Yes. In order for it not to go to court, he would have to accept the settlement.
Not to derail any further, but do you think Colin Kaepernick at this point is the type of dude to just take a settlement?
It depends on what his end game is. Like, is he really trying to prove a point, or is he just trying to, pretty much collect a check for his loss of income over the past year? And the way he's been standing so far, I would venture to guess that he's willing to fight the good fight in this one.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, on top of the fact that he severed his own contract with the 49ers. Mm. So he was the one to walk away from whatever he was getting paid. So it's not like he's going back and saying, oh, they, kicked me out and exiled me and I want what I was paid.
He severed his, but I mean the issue with that is he severed his contract to test free agency. He didn't sever his contract to step away from the NFL. He severed his contract because he wanted to get paid more money from another team.
Okay, well, either way, he walked away from that guaranteed.
But or yes, you are correct.
As guaranteed as it is in the NFL, at any rate.
Right. The other big impact that this could have is if at any point they find concrete evidence that collusion was proven, it automatically negates the current collective bargaining agreement.
Mm.
So, because there's a clause in the bargaining agreement that states, if collusion is proven, the collective bargaining agreement is void, which means we're going to have a lockout.
Yeah, can't wait for
that. Because the players are not going to play without a new bargaining agreement. The players aren't supposed to renegotiate the collective bargaining agreement until like 2020, I think.
I think it's 18, 19, but yeah.
It's coming up in the next few years. And so it's going to pretty much put that shit on, a must-have basis versus, working up to it later. I was kind of expecting some kind of strike or lockout during the negotiation.
That is the general consensus, or at least that's the consensus from some forward-thinking people, that we are going to see a lockout over the next CBA.
Right, but this is going to force it. And because neither party has had time to pretty much start posturing before negotiations, it's going to happen sooner and it's going to happen longer because there's no positions being postured for. There's no positions being negotiated yet. But I mean, this is going to be a process that's going to take longer than a week, obviously. But there's multiple levels of what's going on. But at the base of it all, Cap's pretty much thrown in the towel on his NFL career. And this is something you do when you're pretty much out of options, but you still want some kind of result.
Well, it depends. Like you were saying, did he declare it against everybody, or did he declare it just against certain teams?
The way I
The way I read
understood
it was the entire NFL.
the way I read it was the same way, that he's filing grievance against the NFL for collusion, but that doesn't have to include every team in the NFL. If the NFL was colluding with 3 or 4 franchises in the NFL, that's enough.
Oh, sure.
But
No. Yeah. No, I understand the difference between like what is enough to set the legal precedent and what is. Again, it's the difference between what I think he's claiming and what is technically accurate. Yeah. If he thinks it was all 32, but it was only 4, that still strikes down the CBA.
It's still enough. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But the problem with a collusion case, it is very, 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 very hard to prove. And it's been proven, that fact has been proven time and time again with various other leagues, like in the MLB, where players have struck a grievance of collusion and ended up pretty much being forced into taking a settlement because they couldn't find anything.
Right. It's I mean, basically you're one person fighting against billionaires.
Right. And these franchise owners are going to pretty much support the NFL, even if they agree or disagree with the.
It's almost like the NFL already has a shared revenue system.
So it's going to be interesting. We're definitely going to keep our eye on it. At the surface level, if it goes as far as it can, things are going to get really muddy and really gray.
I was going to say this is going to go one of two ways. Either it's going to totally fall flat, in which case I don't think Kaepernick necessarily walks away with anything. Like, I don't even think he walks away with a settlement, because I think at that point, for more political reasons outside of just the NFL and like literally political reasons, the NFL would just pile drive him into the dirt, or we get to a point where like everybody is exposed.
Yeah,
it would take a very specific kind of leaker to get that information out.
Sure. And that's really the flip side of this whole thing, is if the NFL decides, like, they don't want it to go to court. Nobody that's in their position ever wants it to go to court. But if they get a wild hair up their ass and they decide to let Kaepernick let this go through litigation into the court process, and they decide to pretty much bury Kaepernick in court, like, hey, these are false claims and we can prove it by pretty much opening up our doors, which I don't think ever will happen.
No.
But they can bury Kaepernick in their own legal fees, because they can file for a wrongful lawsuit and have Kaepernick be accountable for their legal fees and all kinds of other stuff. So, but that's something that's probably a less than 1% chance of happening, because for a fact the NFL does not want to open up that many avenues to have that many eyes on paperwork and documentation that only certain people should be seeing.
Also, well, not that I'm saying they wouldn't totally destroy someone, but I mean, the classy move would be like, we're the NFL. You lost this. You are incorrect. We will pay our half. You just have to deal with your own shit. Sorry you lost.
Right.
It would be the classy way to deal with it, but I don't think that will ever happen either. So
no, absolutely not.
It's a weird fuzzy peach of a situation where it's like, oh, there are all of these things, and at the core of it, it's hard and potentially rotten. So
sure,
we're gonna bite into this and see how it goes.
Yep. So the last thing that I wanted to bring up, and then we'll kind of wrap this up, is Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah.
He had his suspension reinstated. He didn't like that, so he took it to court in New York and got his restraining. He was granted another temporary restraining order by a New York judge, which will allow him to play. So we are going to see Ezekiel Elliott play against San Francisco this week, which, I get it. I get what he's doing. He obviously doesn't want to be labeled an abuser, and he's going to fight this tooth and nail.
Sure.
But at some point, he's going to serve this 6 games.
I mean,
why not do it? Why not do it the year that the Cowboys aren't doing that well?
One would think it'd be a better time.
Well, there's a lot of evidence pointing to the fact that he may have not done it.
Oh, well.
There's but it's turned into like such a strong like he said she said. I made this point very very clear when Zeke first got suspended was I
I'm sorry.
I don't
I'm sorry. Real quick, I'm just looking at article titles, and when you're talking about like physical abuse and stuff, maybe don't title the article "Zeke has the upper hand." Maybe that's a bad look.
Yeah, that's not a good look. That's in poor taste.
I make a lot of jokes in poor taste. Most of them don't make the edit, but
Right.
the ones that do, not that bad. Sorry, go on. I have nothing more to say. I have nothing more to say on this situation other than like fuck the Cowboys. So I'll let Keith have the floor on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I've said it from day one. I feel like this suspension it's a violation of the conduct policy. And the fact that the NFL was put in a position where they had to justify it is distressing, because the way they did justify it is like, well, this case involves domestic violence and stuff like that. The problem is he was associating with these people to begin with. The incidents had occurred with this female, and then he kept communicating with this female. He put himself in a position that provided a bad look for the NFL, and that's all the conduct policy is for. Don't make your fucking boss look bad. So obviously the suspension was tacked on to 6 games because there was domestic violence involved, but like there's certain people on the planet that aren't labeling Zeke as an abuser, but beyond the fact that domestic abuse was even involved, I still think the dude should be suspended for being dumb. and putting his team and the NFL in a position where they have to answer for dumb shit like this because of your actions.
It's an interesting perspective.
Well, that's all it's for, Like, if, say, for instance, somebody in the NFL gets tossed out of a bar, doesn't get charged with anything, gets tossed out of a bar for being drunk and disorderly, but he doesn't technically get arrested, he can still get suspended.
Oh, you mean like what LaShawn McCoy did last year, where he got into a bar fight with off-duty police officers, wasn't charged with anything, and then didn't get suspended?
But he could have. Now, he definitely could have. Now, the NFL is obviously more likely to suspend you if you do actually catch charges, but it's completely within the power of the NFL and the teams to suspend the player for conduct that's unbecoming of an of a professional football player. And I think at a certain level, we give these players amnesty because they're entertainers, and I get it. It's where the money is. But if we bring it down to the bare level or the bare metal of the whole situation, is he's supposed to be a professional, and he put himself in a very unprofessional environment that has gotten him into legal trouble, and then continued to associate with the person that got him into that trouble to begin with. So, unfortunately, the issue is not going to be resolved, and I feel like it's just kind of dragging it out at this point. But we'll see what happens with his actual case, and then what the NFL decides to do in response to this injunction. But until then, Zeke's back on the field, so if you have him on your fantasy team, start him.
Injunction, junction, what's your function? Putting fantasy players back on your teams. So with that, I think this has been the Fourth and Wrong podcast. What do you think?
I think so.
All right. Well, this has been the Fourth and Wrong podcast. It's Tuesday, October the 18th, 2017. If you don't get the joke by now, you will eventually. Say goodbye, Keith.
Goodbye, Keith. Oh man, I'm going to stop this one immediately before I add any more